What I think is that mining operations in general are going to be thought of the way that we think of ISPs and stuff today. So I'm talking, AT&T, Verizon level companies that are processing transactions for the global economy. And I think we could absolutely be one of those brands someday.
Hello and welcome back to Brittany Bits. Today we have Kurt Wuckert Jr. and Michael joining us. Hello guys, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Hey Brittany, good to be here.
Welcome,
good,
welcome.
Good to be here. Good to see you again, Brittany.
Always a pleasure, Kurt. Always a pleasure. Well, guys, so I have some questions about mining that I'd really like to get into today. Can we start off with some real basic stuff? What is mining? How does it work? And specifically, why does it matter in particular for BSV?
Oh man, what is mining? So in a real basic sense, it is a race to solve a puzzle in order to show that you care enough to secure the network. Like that is the most basic way to put it. But it doesn't really answer the full question, right?
Right.
So what are we actually doing? What an honest node in Bitcoin is doing is it is competing with the other nodes to be the one that reconciles the state of the ledger the best every 10 minutes. For that, you're rewarded with the block reward, which is a subsidy that Satoshi gave us to bootstrap the network, plus whatever transaction fees exist in each block. So it's a competitive process by which the network is secured. And it acts as a way to say, like, who actually cares enough about the network? So if it were to be attacked, like who's most likely to solve the problem? And it's those who are the most likely to mine it in the first place. So it's like there's all kinds of stuff, people talking about peacocks and signal theory and all of that stuff. And all of that is true, but it doesn't really have to be any more complicated than that. We're glorified digital accountants that compete with a lot of electricity.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, there's multiple parts to being a miner. People think they run an ASIC at home, oh, I'm a Bitcoin miner. But, when you technically dig into it, there's only so many nodes on the network that are producing blocks, and these are the miners. And there's a distributed system that includes hashers and includes the node. And you have to not only find a valid hash, but you have to propagate that block to the other nodes on the network. So there's multiple steps involved in what we do as the pool, but put all together, it's known as mining Bitcoin.
So if we were to break that down even further, because I think both of your answers were well articulated for somebody that may understand Bitcoin a little bit better. But if we were to explain mining to, say, our Nan or, our cousin who has no technical experience, how would you break that down in the most simplistic terms?
Oh man. Well, so basically Bitcoin, where's the easiest place to start? Bitcoin is a ledger of account. So imagine if it's just one, right? There's a list of money in, money out, and who owns what money on that ledger. Bitcoin is an accounting system. It's not really anything else, but the mining has a lot to do with specifically that, like who owns what and who can reconcile who owns what the best every 10 minutes. And so what I do, and there's a couple of things that I can do as somebody who wants to send a Bitcoin transaction. Let's say I have one Bitcoin, I want to send it to you, Brittany. I can send it directly to you, in which case you would broadcast it to the miners, or I can broadcast it to the miners and ask them to send it to Brittany. So those are my two options for how to send a Bitcoin transaction. When that happens, the miners, the nodes, the pools, the whatever, there's a lot of weird synonyms. This really should probably start with a vocab quiz. But ultimately, we're competing to be the best, to send it to you with the most efficiency and build the best block. And best is a bunch of specifics, but really it's just people. Think of it as if each of us was a node on the network, there's three of us. we're competing to be the one to find that, like, solve the puzzle first and propagate transactions the best. And whoever does that is the miner who mines that block. You get the reward for it, you get the fees for it. So, but we're basically just competing to be the best accountants. This is like having 3 accountants in town, and we all use the same money system, and whoever accounts for it the best makes the most money. And that's a simple way to put it. And a lot of that stuff is just abstracted out with a lot of software and economic game theory. And that's where people get super into the weeds, but it really is just that. It's a competitive accounting system.
I like how you put that. So where would be the best place to go learn more about mining in depth? And what, from your perspective, are some of the best resources, tools, websites that you use most frequently as a miner?
Man, I don't even know. I think there's so much bad information out there. Like there's a lot of I mean, you can read books by all kinds of Bitcoiners that really explain it poorly. I think I might have to default here to Michael, because I don't even know. Honestly, when we started Gorilla Pool, there was a lot of like, I mean, we know the basics. Like there are basics that are shared, but properly running a pool to be competitive in different environments is, a lot of people keep that really close to the vest because it's proprietary, and it's a profit thing. Whoever does things the best makes the most money. But if you share your secret sauce, then everyone will do it. Then you need to come up with something else. So maybe Michael has a better answer.
Well, no, I think you're right. A lot of it is done through just doing it, trial and error. And that's been that way for Bitcoin mining a long time. You have people, in terms of hashing and running the ASICs, say you're operating them at home, there's a lot of content on YouTube that you can wade through in terms of how to start hashing and mining Bitcoin. But in terms of running the node, you're right, Kurt. It's kind of there's a small circle of people who ever actually operated a node that have produced blocks on the Bitcoin blockchain, and it's a competitive thing. So we're not going to like spill our secret sauce either. But there is a lot of content out there on mining in general that one kind of just has to wade through it. I can't really point to any specific resources, but it's just years of having waded through all the crap that's out there and figuring out what makes sense to be where we are today.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cultural immersion thing. It's like asking, how do you become a world champion basketball player or something? And it's like, right. Well, it's part genetics, and then it's part drive, and then it's part having kids to play with when you're young, and all these other, like there's a lot of ingredients that go into making a special person, and frankly, it really does take a special person to run a mining operation, because they're crazy. Like Satoshi didn't give us a handbook for how to mine or run a mining operation or almost anything with Bitcoin. Like the Bitcoin white paper is super vague, actually. So he gives us a lot of like general concepts. There are some specifics as well, but mining is not really one of them. And
things that Satoshi necessarily didn't foresee. But like I'll say for me, like again, I kind of am the type to just try it and do it. Like the first sort of exposure I had was in 2014. Actually, in 2011, we were looking to mine Bitcoin. My father and I, we were like, "Wow, this is amazing. Let's get in on it. We want to mine Bitcoin. That seems like the most sense." But at the time, GPUs were the only way to mine. AMD GPUs in particular were the best, but they were just like sold out worldwide. We had like a big parabolic price pump in 2011 to $30, and GPUs everywhere were just not to be found. So I kind of got disheartened on the mining thing. But and later in 2014, we saw good old Charlie Lee launched Litecoin, and that brought a whole storm of forks and altcoins. I said, how hard can this be if so many people are doing this? So I wanted to find out. I forked Litecoin. I just copy pasted it, changed the name to Dorian Coin in honor of the guy who everybody thought was Satoshi for a hot minute. And saw how hard it would be, launched a new Genesis block and started mining it, and kind of just dove in to figure it out on my own. Then I had to figure out how to operate like a mining pool so that multiple people could join in and start mining this thing. So just for me, tearing it apart piece by piece and learning all the context around how they all fit together was kind of how I got to where we are now.
I love that, Michael. That's awesome. Wow, 2011. So you're early in this, right? But speaking on more on that, what are some things that you wish you would have known that you know now when you first started mining?
For me, it's the existence of ASICs in the first place. I similar story to Michael. I heard about Bitcoin in 2012. Mining sounded like, oh, I can just turn my computer on to run this like probably malware thing and get some coins out of it that are worth something. Like, so I tinkered with it in 2013 after doing a lot of digging, and I realized I couldn't mine with my computer. So then I had a bunch of friends in IT, and I worked as sort of a contractor in IT on the side as well. So I was like, hey, let's try to get some GPUs, because I realized that was a thing people were doing. And by the time I finally got like a rig set up, ASICs existed in the market, but I don't think anybody really knew they existed, or at least I didn't know at the time. And ultimately, just like I was always like too late with my hardware situation until I think it was 2015. Like I was basically right on the verge of like, I'm going to sell all this stuff. I wasn't able to mine any Bitcoin practically, but then Ethereum came out. And I was like, oh, it's GPU mineable. And so it was just instantly like, well, let's just do that and do really well with that. So like that was great. But I always wanted to do Bitcoin, obviously, but it was basically just impossible because the curve right when I hopped in was so stark, and I wasn't that good, So it it just got away from me. But if I would have been 6 months earlier, like 3 or 4 times, I probably would have been like, I don't even know. Like I would have been like Marco Strang or some of these other guys that run like these massive farms around the world.
Yeah, it was the early days of ASICs were, sketchy at best. We had a lot of scams, ripoffs, like Butterfly Labs, I think is the name that comes up to mind. But it was difficult to really obtain the ASICs for one thing and profitably operate them and et cetera, like in those early years. But, now we have sort of regular legit companies that produce good machines that we're all using today. But in the early days, mining Bitcoin or SHA-256 was, you kind of had to know the right people, and it was harder to get into. Like I had a colleague who bought a machine from another coworker. He spent 100 BTC on this machine, and he intended, at the time to make it all back plus some, but the difficulty shot up and new machines were released, and he just totally got wrecked. I think he maybe made half of it back and had to just turn it off at some point. So, it wasn't just guaranteed profit in those early days. You kind of had to know and get somewhat lucky. But people in the very early days and before ASICs, it was definitely the time to be doing it. I wished I had been, but and I tried, but I wish I'd continued to try. Even after the $30 price jump and then crash, I kind of got off of the mining idea and wanted to jump into just operating a different kind of Bitcoin business and getting involved that way. So, but I always kind of wanted to circle back to it. So, I'm glad we are now.
Did you have something to add there, Kurt?
No, I mean, it's funny. It's just, it's the same thing on my end. Like, I quit on it a couple of times briefly, because I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I just don't get it. And like, it turns out, like in hindsight, I did get it. It just was always, I don't have enough money, or I didn't have enough time, or at least at the time it felt like it was a frivolous thing to spend too much time on. So I was spending extra time, but I owned a company at the time, and I was super busy, and that was also growing. I was like, I'm not gonna focus all my energy on this Bitcoin thing. And it's like, if I did, again, it would be, I don't even know, right? Like right. I would be some kind of mining magnate at this point if I were to just like been really unreasonable and sold everything to really do Bitcoin mining all the way. So it's just one of those things where like, the most unreasonable people did the best because they just were like, I got, no debt, no need for cash flow, like whatever. I'm just gonna ape in, and if I fail, I'll just live with my parents forever, that kind of thing. And like, so, but like, but those are the people that are huge today, Right. So it's I don't know, it's just funny thinking of like what the old days were actually like.
Well, they focused all the development and economic investment in one specific area in the hashing, and it's an area you can't just jump into. You can't just go fab up your own SHA-256 ASICs. I mean, they really grabbed a stranglehold in areas where someone like me could add value in terms of like operating at a high scale and trying to scale this thing as Satoshi originally designed. That just wasn't a thing. So it wasn't that interesting to me until the scaling wars sort of heated back up.
Right.
Well, and that's what's funny about it, because like I've talked about this with a few guys. Like one of the guys who I talk about this with sort of often is Matt Zitsky, because I think he's sort of in the same boat. I think he was also mining in like 2011 and whatever, but he had a very similar experience with like I think he may have actually mined a block like on a laptop or something like that. And so he has a little bit of a different experience, but at the same time, it's like this heavy specialization on hashing and the subsidy. And I think the one thing, if I had a criticism for Satoshi, it would be that the subsidy is too long. Like the subsidy is too big for too long, and it made everything specialize that direction, which sort of it created the opportunity for a subsidized lifestyle, which in my opinion is almost always a bad thing. Like I'll take a bootstrap subsidy, but when the bootstrap subsidy is 20 years long, like that's half your life, or it's half your career years, so it's a little bit like, maybe it should have been a 5-year halvening cycle or something like that to make people have to really think about scaling properly sooner, because now there's all these people who are just filthy rich and have all this stuff now because they were able to just live off the subsidy. So it's the same kind of thing you see with people that like, I don't know, who kind of screw like nonprofit organizations or get really close to like some weird niche in government policy, and like they become super rich, but they didn't actually provide any real value. Like they do a thing and it made them wealthy, but it like nobody else benefited really. And I think it's a little bit like that in the mining economy.
Well, can we touch a little bit more on hashing? Like, how does the price follow hash, and what is the significance of that?
Yeah, I mean, to date, price is the number one indicator for where hash power is going to be.
Right. But
we've seen a few blips of this over like when Bitcoin Cash like was getting close to flipping BTC and some of these other things. Hash power follows profit. And so if we had terabyte blocks on BSV, it becomes a lot more profitable to mine BSV regardless of the price. So that's the bold prediction of Satoshi. The big blocker movement in general is like, yeah, price matters. It's a scarce asset. Like there's an economic aspect to all of these things, but the economic aspect that nobody considers is the profitability of a very large block. And they just decided, like the culture decided to not pursue that conceptually. Like they're just like, let's just drive the price up forever and make sure that, we have really good memes and that'll be great. And so we haven't really looked into that. But I mean, there's this exponential effect, not of dollars, because you can only absorb so much fiat value. But in theory, there is no top to how big a block can be. I mean, there is because of physics at some point, but we don't really know what it is. And so discovering it is part of that process. But yeah, I mean, petabytes or exabytes or, like massive blocks of data become very absurdly profitable to mine. And it's our belief that hash will go the direction of profitability, even if profitability doesn't have anything to do with the price of the coin, which I think they will re-correlate at some point, but we still have to prove that point in order for that correlation to start to happen. So it's a very weird world when there's like 3 or 4 SHA-256 Bitcoins, and like these are all economics that Satoshi did not plan for. So it's a little bit like, I don't know, we're just in uncharted water a little bit.
Definitely. I think you guys were touching on that a little bit earlier about how, there's a bit of a barrier to entry with knowledge and the acquiring of machines, the funds, resources needed to get started in this. And you really have to devote a fair amount of time in order to be profitable in that sense. But there's a lot of people who maybe do have the knowledge, but perhaps don't know where to buy the best type of mining equipment, or perhaps they're looking for a cheaper version alternative to the mining equipment, or even used equipment for that matter. So what would you say to somebody who's looking to purchase used equipment? How would you tell them they could test it, try it out? What indicators would let you know that the equipment is safe to go ahead and buy being used?
Just trust. I mean, just like anything else, like, if you get an eBay seller or Facebook marketplace or something, like, let them like bench test it for 24 hours or something, but like, who's going to let you do that? So
right.
the price has got to reflect that eventuality. But we have a really good partnership with a few different people. First of all, for brand new equipment, you can buy straight through Gorilla Pool. You can pay with BSV. We'll do the whole co-location thing. So you buy a brand new ASIC, we hook it up, we manage it. You benefit from commercial pricing on electricity and on all of that other stuff. So we have a turnkey option available through some of our connections, which simplifies it for people that want to get in and have a budget somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 12 grand per machine, depending on price action and stuff. But that's a little bit of a high shot for all kinds of people. If you want to do used, man, be ready to be very frustrated and intrepid and handy and a whole bunch of other things. Like we do sell. We have a partnership with a company called Orion and Taurus. They're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They're good friends of ours. They do refurbished equipment. It's still warranted and all kinds of stuff, but you're still paying several $1,000s as a rule. And then you're running it out of your house where, your power conditions, your air cleanliness conditions, particles in the air, and all this stuff are really not ideal. And I think most people would probably get discouraged after a certain amount of time, unless you're like a super tinkerer. We have a lot of people that mine with the pool that just have like 1 to 3 miners and they run them out of the garage or basement and do really well with it, like for themselves. But it's very much a hobby, and you have to be in love with the idea of like turning your ASICs off once a month and blowing them out and making sure everything's good. It's a job. It's a commercial experience, and doing it at home is something you have to really be into to make that work well. There are some ways around it, but ultimately they all kind of look like starting a real business, frankly.
Right. That actually answered quite a few of my next questions. So, as far as investing with Gorilla Pool, when could somebody see a potential return on investment?
I mean, that's again a price thing right now.
Mm.
So if we're going to be in a bear market until after the next halvening,
right,
we're talking about 3 years or whatever of negative price action. In which case you're weighing out like a Bitcoin valuated profit model. So that's pretty difficult to do. So I tend to price it in fiat and assume that if we're in a bear market, they're going to take 20 to 24 months to pay the machine off. And then everything after that is gravy, right? But and they have a lifespan. A new machine that's properly maintained has a lifespan of 5 years or more. There's still people that are running S9s that are 5 years old, and if they've been maintained, they just run. Now, the problem is all of the unpredictability of all this stuff. Like, you might buy a machine and in 6 months, some company comes out with a machine that's 100 times more effective because they've had some breakthrough in the technology or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're inefficient. You're never going to pay your machine off. And all you can hope for is either cash flow or flipping your machine for like half of what you bought it for a few months ago. And like, those are the kind of things that you kind of can't predict, unfortunately. The Antminers, the modern Antminer S19 is a good machine. They last long. They're well built. So if you maintain them, you can run them. They will run for years, but it's all of those external market forces that you just can't really predict. So let's say we hit a raging bull market. Let's say BSV gets multiple enterprise clients, and there's just a huge, massive retail boom, and blocks are, the average block size is 50 gigabytes day to day to day to day. Well, shoot, I mean, you paid the thing off in 9 months, and you're just killing it, right? So both of those things are totally possible, right? So that's kind of it's the crapshoot, and that's any entrepreneurial thing. It's like, hey, I'm going to open a burger joint, and I think it's going to be really good, and people are going to love it because I'm a really good cook. And then like you open up, and then 2 blocks down, like some new like burger franchise that has pretty good burgers but way better logistics than you, just makes it that like you're just never really profitable, and then you just have a junky job for your whole life. Like that kind of thing happens. Like that's entrepreneurship, and
you got to weigh the pros versus the cons. But definitely, I know that we've been sorry to cut you off, Michael. I know that we've been talking a lot, and we see your face a lot, kind of representing Gorilla Pool. But Root, we haven't really, I haven't really heard so much from you. So Root, I had a question. What is your main role at Gorilla Pool, and what do you focus most of your time doing?
I guess I would call, COO, chief operations, or CTO. I basically operate the BSV nodes that our pool relies on, the Stratum endpoints, merchant API endpoints, basically all the infrastructure, the technical infrastructure and software. I operate and make sure, that's all running. I also hash on the pool, so I'm a user of the pool. And yeah, I guess that's mainly what does my day-to-day look like. It's basically watching log files all day, making sure everything is in sync, that our hash rate is normal. I watch for network problems, like any potential reorgs, or I keep an eye on the mempool, how many transactions are coming in, making sure our nodes are seeing the transactions. How big is our next block going to be? What's our orphan risk going to be if we were to find a block right now? There's just a lot of things, I guess, that goes into it, but those are the first things that come to mind.
Well, how do you think, how does Gorilla Pool do things differently than other mining pools on BSV?
Well, I think we do things similarly to, for example, Tall. We do sort of co-opetition with them. We talk to them, and I think we've sort of modeled our business around what they're doing, because I think they're doing a great job. And what are we doing differently? I mean, you have some small like pools that hop in periodically to just turbo mine some blocks and milk the subsidy, and they'll just mine small blocks with very few transactions. They're leaving a lot of money on the table. They're not operating API endpoints. They're not interfacing with their customers, who are people like CryptoFights, who are generating the most of the transactions on the network. These are the kind of people you should be talking with, solving problems for, networking with, etc. So, we're operating more in a customer forward way than other mining pools out there. I haven't seen anybody sort of doing the sort of legwork behind the scenes that Kurt and I are doing. So
no, you guys are doing a fantastic job. And I love how much information you guys are putting out there, and all of the advertising that you're doing to bring people in. I love it. But Michael, how do I put this? How does Gorilla Pool plan to handle the electrical costs associated with mining now and in the future?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, from the pool's perspective, the electrical costs are not only a concern in terms of how much hash power you're operating. So the pool itself right now is not operating much of its owned hash power. So we have users and hash providers who own their own machines or are renting their own machines, and they're responsible for paying the electricity, and they're earning whatever the machines produce. So for us, we maintain the costs. For us are infrastructure costs in terms of servers and data centers, basically.
Gotcha.
So we do plan to
which is also not insignificant. It's not nearly as much as a hashing operation, but it's
right. Yeah.
Still it's bigger than most people would
We're
expect,
not working
I
with
imagine.
Raspberry Pis here. We're working with high-end servers in data centers all over the world, and they can get expensive. But yeah, but we do plan and hope to have our own pool-owned hash power, similar to Tal, where they have their own mining facilities, mining with their own pool for their own profit. So, we're just 6 months old and starting to get there. We're just not there yet.
Right. Well, do either one of you think you could answer what Mappy is and why everyone is having issues with it, and what are some potential solutions for it?
Oh man. I'll give the short version. Mappy is a really good idea that's gotten way out of scope and is not particularly well implemented anywhere. In short, the classic way to broadcast a transaction in Bitcoin is to just send it to the peer-to-peer network. So people just send a transaction to a pay-to-public key hash, and miners just route it however they see fit. They're competing to route it best. That works fine at a certain scale, a very low scale for the record. But when you get bigger, it makes more sense to say, look, I don't want just every disconnected node on the network to have to be my routing path. Like just because I'm, say in South Florida, and if I broadcast a transaction over my basic connection, that it's going to go through a bunch of Raspberry Pis or whatever before it hops its way toward a node that can actually do something with it. And so Mappy is this idea that you can set up, it stands for Merchant API.
Okay.
The idea is that a merchant would receive a payment and then they would forward it to the mining partner of their choice, meaning a really well-connected node, so that they can confirm a double spend proof basically instantly. And that's all well and good. Like that's a very good idea. I actually love the idea. It was one of the things that I was most excited about when I first heard the concept at a CoinGeek conference. But the way it's been implemented, first of all, it switched programming languages in the middle of its product cycle for reasons unknown, and then it became less stable as it became sort of bigger. Like, hey, let's do all these other things over Mappy, and it still doesn't really reliably do that one thing, which is broadcast my transaction directly to miners in a very consistent way. Now, as a percentage, it does it fine. Like it works, but even 98% uptime like sounds good unless you're doing 5 million transactions a day, in which case there's a lot of rechecks that you're
right.
Like, shoot, okay, now we're missing inputs for this and blah blah blah. So there's problems with it that really need to be tightened up. It's a great concept, and running it is wonderful. I think the other problem is a little bit cultural. Like there was a business opportunity to say, well, hey, just send transactions directly to us and we'll hold them privately in our mempool rather than propagate them elsewhere. And when you have the most hash power in the network, that works really well for your business model because you're keeping those transactions. But for anybody that's smaller, as we had to learn very much the hard way, we would keep private transactions, and we still can, but it makes it that we have to choose large block size or lots of private transactions or whatever. And it's made it really difficult to be profitable in an environment where we're a significantly smaller hasher than the larger ones on the network. So I'm sure Michael has his own feedback, as he's been the guy to like receive a lot of the tech support calls from our clients who are, hey, it's down again. Hey, it's down again. Hey, we're missing input. Hey, it's not, just, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, like Kurt said, the idea is good. We need ways for developers and users to be able to submit transactions directly to miners. So because we're not going to expect users to run their own node and broadcast them peer to peer like the old BTC core idea. So we need the solutions. The solutions need some improvement, I guess. We were running an older version at the advice of Dean Little, who was operating the Matterpool software, the same software that we're running. So we decided to go with that. It was easier to get up and going right away than the newer version, and we'd had reports from developers as well of stability issues with the latest stuff with Tal's implementation of the Mappy. When we have had issues with the version we're running being old, unsupported, and it'll crash, but we've kind of worked our way around it to keep it running. But I do think I'm not that keen personally on the idea of keeping transaction sets private. I think part of the Bitcoin white paper talks about nodes broadcasting all transactions to the other nodes. I guess you could argue you do that when you find a block with them, but it makes more sense if everybody is aware of what the other nodes blocks are going to look like before they happen. It just makes things run a lot more smoothly. And as a minority pool in particular, keeping a large amount of transactions private like that is just increases our orphan risk such that it really doesn't make sense for us. So that's, I guess, my thoughts on Mappy.
And to be fair, the larger hashers on the network, and I'll just say it, the new CEO of Tal, Richard Baker, agrees. Like he looks at it and says, that it's sort of creating less than ideal network environment to be keeping transactions until they're mined into blocks. And part of it is zero confirmation reliability, which is when somebody sends a transaction that it's instantly viewed by the whole network. And if you do it privately, it's really not the case. Then you're really just relying on your mining partner. And that's less security than you probably want for a lot of things. So I think the last couple of years of experimenting with that has led to sort of a new path than we would have expected a year ago. I think a year ago, the idea for a company like Tal was, hey, we're going to get all these clients and they're going to give us a ton of exclusive transactions. We're going to be really, really wealthy on it. And it seems untenable because it makes the network less profitable for other people, which then creates its own extra problems. So it's one of those things where the incentives of Bitcoin force you to cooperate best in order to compete the best. And it's fascinating.
So yeah, no, definitely. My gosh, it's a lot to think about. I think it's a good idea in theory, but poor execution, so to speak, and put into practice, it's not exactly as it was in theory.
Yep.
So
Sure.
I guess I wanted to ask you guys, why did you guys decide to team up in the first place? What was the whole idea? How did you guys find each other? And what happened?
I'll jump in. It all started. I mean, I followed Kurt for years. He's been a fixture in the BSV world for a long time. And when the Gorilla DAO was announced, I saw Kurt had jumped in, and I thought, all right, that's my signal. This is legit. I'll jump in, see what's going on. Bought 100 ape tokens and joined in. At the time, there was like nothing there yet. We were just like a chat group on the early Twitch beta, and it was like buggy. Like,
yeah, it barely worked.
So we needed a place to kind of discuss things. I jumped in and volunteered my time in infrastructure to support a Mattermost chat server. Then we all joined and we started throwing ideas out. One of Kurt's first ideas was to use the funds to fund a mining operation or mining pool. And I just jumped at it. I thought, this is perfect. This is my chance to, work my way towards the center of the network. It was a helping hand from Kurt, and I just wanted to make myself available and just seize the opportunity. And yeah, we just worked really well together, and right away with things just started taking off. So
absolutely. So what would you guys consider to be like Gorilla Pool's short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals for the future?
Oh man, short-term, we've got a bunch of stuff. We have so many like little sticks in the fire, like things like getting our website finished and up, launching an SPV API endpoint that people can connect to and not have to run their own node anymore, that kind of thing. So just lots of little things, tightening up infrastructure generally. Like we've learned a lot of cumulatively big lessons, but each one was like a tiny thing. Like, oh, okay, we should actually run things this way rather than that. And so we've done a lot of the sort of tightening up the ship, and our orphan rate is generally down, and our successful blocks is generally up and trending up. So for us, like, the short-term stuff is like, we're actually in a pretty good spot, and we just have a few little sort of business things. Midterm, gosh, I don't even know what that means in Bitcoin. I think just surviving up into the next halvening. It's always the lower third of mining operations basically either die or get acquired around the halvening time, because your revenue gets cut in half. So if you were only slimly profitable, it puts you in a really rough spot. So I think just accumulating and surviving would be a hell of an accomplishment in and of itself up into that. And then long term, I mean, just absolute global domination, being a world-class data processing company. What I think is that mining operations in general are going to be thought of the way that we think of ISPs and stuff today. So I'm talking, AT&T, Verizon level companies that are processing transactions for the global economy. And I think we could absolutely be one of those brands someday, assuming we make the right decisions. We can continually position ourselves to be lean, mean, profitable, and provide real service to the real economy. If BSV is successful and we ride that ship up, we really, we'll be a massive company. And so that's the long-term goal. Ultimately, pay the bills, do more jujitsu, spend more time with my family, I guess. So
the dream.
How about you, Michael?
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, I think for me, a a long-term goal, I guess, is to compete with the biggest players on the network, which is TAL right now. So, my target's set there. I'd like to grow our share of the network to be a serious player. And I'd like to provide all of the API services that the development community needs for working with the Bitcoin blockchain. I want to work closely with developers to solve their problems. So that's what we're here for. We're honored to do it. So that's what I would say.
Right. Well, how can we as a community just how can the community help you to achieve those goals? Is there anything that we can do to help you guys further succeed?
I mean, just general support. I mean, let people know. I mean, it's hard to, it's not one of those things where it makes sense to like weaponize an army of people to like knock on doors or anything. Like, hey, would you like to mine with Gorilla Pool? It's only $10,000 investment to get one ASIC or whatever.
We can become the church of Gorilla Pool. Everybody gets a banana.
Yeah, no, I mean, sure. Let's found a church and become a nonprofit and all of that. That'd be helpful. I don't know. I think just goodwill in general. I think letting people know, just spreading the word to product creators, wallet developers and app creators and stuff like, hey, why don't you send your transactions to Gorilla Pool? Hey, did you know that Gorilla Pool will help you with X? That's really all we can ask for that I can think of anyways. Just keep it real, put a banana in your Twitter profile handle, and
good vibes, good support. Yeah. Much love from the community. We feel that every day, so we appreciate it. We're glad that we're a trusted and liked brand out there, and we want to maintain and grow that. So we just keep us in your hearts and minds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amen to that.
Well, as we wind down here, is there anything that I should have asked you guys but didn't? Anything you want to mention before we wrap things up?
Oh man, I think more than anything, like, what I want people to know, what I want people to think of when they think of Gorilla Pool is a company that wants to help. Like, there's so much like secretive nonsense and all the cryptic stuff, because crypto, but all the other stuff going on in the universe. But really, if you've got a business idea that like you're not sure if it makes sense on Bitcoin because of any number of reasons, like, reach out and ask. Like, we might be able to provide you some ingredient that makes your business make sense that it otherwise would not. And that's really what we are. Like, we are a service provider. We're like your local, we're the local ISP. Like, we're your access to Bitcoin, and without working directly with a pool like Gorilla Pool, in many ways, like you're stuck being like, I don't want to say a second class citizen, but being able to reach out and say, hey, can I get a special deal? Or is there some way you can help me? Or can I broadcast this transaction like this because I need to do a specific thing? Like, just reach out. Like, it really is okay to DM or whatever. You don't have to, ask for permission or just, I have to send it in this way. Like, there's a very weird cultural thing in the Bitcoin space where you're supposed to be a loner and you're supposed to be really non-cooperative. And Gorilla Pool wants to cooperate. Like, we want to be an integral part of your business as a service provider. So I don't know if that's a question that I wish you asked, but it's how I want people to think about the brand. Maybe Michael's got something to add.
No, well said. I couldn't say it any better, Kurt. That's why you're here. Thank you, sir. That was
Sure.
We're here to help for sure. So DM us anytime.
Definitely. Well, Kurt, Michael, I appreciate you guys coming onto the show and sharing with us a lot of your information and your wealth of knowledge. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to share this information with us.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yes, thank you.
Well, with that being said, guys, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and also follow us on Twitter at BrittanyBits.